Welcome back. We are moving ahead with the third session of our attempt to solve the opinion types question. Here we have seen how to solve an opinion question when your thesis is completely agree. Now we are going to solve another question. So we have two sentences in the question, and there is a question there. To what extent do you agree? Two sentences are there in the statement part. This is an opinion question. Nowadays, the job sector has become more and more competitive. Therefore, it is mandatory for a person to train himself in multiple professions. To what extent do you agree? So this is the question that we are going to see. So as far as we have discussed in the previous session, we have to frame an introduction first for this thing. So when we go ahead with an introduction, here we have two statements. Unlike the previous question, we had only one statement there. Learning a second language is always better. One particular statement and one question. It was quite easy. But right now, we have two sentences as the statement part. The statement part, we have two sentences. And they're asking whether you agree or not. So see first of all whether how these two sentences are connected. First of all, we need to analyze that. Nowadays, the job sector has become more and more competitive. Therefore, it is mandatory for a person to train himself in multiple professions. To what extent do you agree? Now, this is the thing here. Nowadays, the job sector has become more and more competitive. It is connected by, therefore, it is mandatory for a person to train himself in multiple professions. So even though there are two sentences, these sentences are closely connected. It's very closely linked. Now let's see further. We are going to frame an introduction for this thing. So what I'm going to do is that I'm not going to write anything else in as a background information. I have enough matter here in these two sentences. I have the matter here. I need to absorb the matter from these two sentences and present it in another way. That's what we are going to do. We call it paraphrasing. So let's see how to do that. Nowadays, the job sector has become more and more competitive. Therefore, it's mandatory for a person to train himself in multiple professions. To what extent do you agree? Okay. So we have framed the introduction of this particular thing. So it's 37 words there, and we have framed the introduction. So we have combined the first two sentences there, and we have given the thesis. In this world in which many face cutthroat competition in finding his desired job, finding their desired job, it is opined that a job seeker ought to complete training in multiple professions. I cannot agree to this notion to the full extent. So here, in the previous question, my thesis was, I tend to agree to this statement completely. It means there was no other argument. Complete agreement was there. But in this particular thesis statement, you have given a different thesis. I cannot agree to this notion to the full extent. It means you disagree. If you don't agree to this to the full extent, if you don't agree to that completely, then you disagree. So the extent of agreement is measured here, or the extent of disagreement is measured here. Say, for example, in the first question, we presented the argument completely agree. So first paragraph agree, second paragraph agree, third paragraph agree. If it is in the opposite way, first paragraph disagree, second paragraph disagree, third paragraph disagree. Now, in this particular thing, it's not like that. It's not a complete agreement. It's not a complete disagreement. It says, I cannot agree to this notion to a full extent. So if I draw a line here to represent agree, so agree, disagree. So you cannot completely agree. You may stand somewhere here in this line. So we call it Likert scale. So what we call it's a Likert scale. The extent of agreement. If you mark it there, 100% agreement, then you can write all three paragraphs, agree, agree, agree. And if you mark it here, you can say disagree, disagree, disagree. This is what we have discussed in the previous session. But right now, we are not marking it in the extreme. We are not marking in the disagreement. We are not marking it in the agreement, full agreement. Not to the full extent, not to this extent. We are going to mark somewhere here, somewhere here, somewhere here, somewhere here. So we have said agree, I cannot agree to this notion to the full extent. So it is somewhere in the middle. We can identify whether it is here, or it is here, or it is here, only when we read the paragraphs. And we will get a more clear picture in the conclusion. I hope you have understood. So in the previous question, I have said I completely agree. So I marked it here. I have written first paragraph agree, second paragraph agree, third paragraph agree. If you would have written disagree, you would have gone with disagree first paragraph, disagree second paragraph, disagree third paragraph. Quite simple. But right now, we have marked it somewhere middle, somewhere here, somewhere here, somewhere here, somewhere here, somewhere in this line. So it is not clear. Your opinion is not clear, but it's clear that you don't agree to it completely, but you are somewhere there. Whether you completely disagree, no, it's not. Whether you completely agree, no, it's not. It's somewhere in the middle. So we need to determine whether it is here, whether it is here, or whether it is here when we analyze the body paragraphs. So we are going to say, we are going to describe this thing, where exactly the point is. The point may be here, the point may be here, the point may be here. Where exactly you stand is to be discussed in the body paragraphs. And we will be getting a perfect picture in the conclusion. We are going to give the reader the perfect stand when we complete the conclusion. So as far as now, the reader understood that you are not standing in this point, you are not standing in this point, you are standing somewhere in the middle of the extremes. This is another way of presenting the opinion task. You can completely agree, you can completely disagree, you can stand somewhere in the middle. So you can point out, I'm not completely agreeing, I'm not completely disagreeing. In the sense you stand in the middle, you have to explain in the body paragraphs what is your stand with clear examples and explanations, and at last you have to give a clear-cut conclusion, and that is the final answer for this question. This is what our plan is. So what will I write in the first paragraph? And how can we frame the first body paragraph? First body paragraph. What can I write in the first body paragraph? I cannot agree to this notion to the full extent. So whether can I start with agree or can I start with disagree? What you are writing more? What you are writing less? Or are you writing in the middle? You have three options here. First option is that you can write more agree. Second option is that you can write more disagree. Third option is that you can write 50-50. So if you are going with the first option, that is, I cannot agree to this notion to the full extent. And if you are marking the answer here, this is agree, this is disagree, you are telling that this is 80% I agree, 20% I disagree. So I agree to the statement 80%, majority, I agree. I'm not telling it should be compulsory, but it should be highly recommended. But I don't think that it should be completely agree. I say that it is recommended highly, 20%. So this is the matter. So you are writing the matter in favor of this thing. You need to have training in multiple fields. To a greater extent, I agree to that, but not to the complete extent. I'm not telling that I have to say that completely I agree. Completely, I think it is not mandatory. So it is highly recommended because it has become almost necessary to train yourself in. But if I go with a mandatory notion, then it won't be. So this is number one option. So this is what we are going to see here in the first part of the explanation. Let's see. The first body paragraph, I am going to write agree. So sorry. Why I recommend this explanation example. Second body paragraph, it is the same. Why I recommend this explanation example. The third body paragraph, you are writing what is the exception? Explanation or example. Conclusion. A clear-cut answer. So here it is. The first body paragraph, why I recommend this. Second body paragraph, why I recommend this. Third body paragraph, what is the exception? Why someone is telling that it should not be mandatory. Yes, why I highly recommend this. That is good. Again, highly. The necessity, it has, you focus on the necessity of training yourself in this particular areas, multiple areas. And the third body paragraph, we are going with the exception here. So we are going to write more sentences in the first body paragraph and the second body paragraph. And in the third body paragraph, you are going to write less. And if you are, I cannot agree to this notion to the full extent. So if you are going with the same thesis, and if you disagree to this thing to a great extent, you have to write it reverse. So this is for agree to a greater extent. Now I'm going with a disagree to a greater extent. So what I'll do here is that First body paragraph, why I do not recommend this. Why I do not recommend this. What is the benefit of doing so? That's it. Again, in this case, you are writing more for disagree and less for agree. Again, the question is, if you want to, in this case, if you want to frame to get a better job, a successful person in the career hunting area, you have to have trained in multiple options. So let's see both the conclusions here. So if it is agreed to a great extent, how will be my conclusion? This is the thing. How will be my conclusion? So I highly recommend this. I highly recommend this. What is an exception? In this case, what will be my conclusion? In conclusion, so to conclude, even though there are, so I don't know, though there are criticisms in making the training compulsory for making multi-facet training compulsory for job seekers. I think in this highly competitive world, it has become more nearly become a necessity. So this is my conclusion. A clear-cut conclusion is given if I agree to this particular statement. That means in this, nowadays the job sector has become more and more competitive. Therefore, it is mandatory for a person to train himself in multiple professions. So I cannot agree to this notion to the full extent. This is what you have said. In the body paragraph, first body paragraph, you said about why I highly recommend this. In the second body paragraph, you have said why I highly recommend this. In the third body paragraph, you have said there is an exception. We have it's not rational to make it mandatory. We have to make it optional only. And if you have said like that, your conclusion will be like this. Though there are criticisms in making the multi-facet training compulsory for job seekers, I think in this competitive world, it has nearly become a necessity. Nearly become a necessity. It has almost become a necessity. 100%. Now, what if I disagree to a great extent? I don't recommend this in the first paragraph explanation. I don't recommend this in the second paragraph. Third body paragraph. What is the benefit of doing so? In this case, I'm going to frame the conclusion. To conclude, okay. So I have framed the conclusion for this thing. To conclude, though there are obvious benefits when a person trains himself in multiple areas, I feel making it compulsory has some visible practical challenges. Where are the practical challenges? You have explained the practical challenges here in the first paragraph and the second paragraph. Where are the obvious benefits? The obvious benefits are here. Let's move ahead to the first essay. To conclude, though there are criticisms in making the multi-phase training compulsory for job seeker, where are the criticism? Criticism is here. I think in this highly competitive nearly become necessary. Why I highly recommend this? Why I highly recommend this? First body paragraph and second body paragraph highly recommends this. Now, I have made it clear. If I can say in the middle, so to what extent do you agree? The question is, to what extent do you agree? I have not agreed to the complete extent. I have not disagreed to the complete extent. In this case, I can give a clear-cut conclusion. And in the body paragraph, you can explain this conclusion. If you have written like this, you can explain in this way. If you have written like this, the conclusion, you can explain in this way, 3 body paragraphs. Now, you have another choice that you can stand in the middle. In that case, you will write only 2 body paragraphs. You can say 50-50. There are obvious benefits, there are obvious drawbacks. You have to present it in equal proportions. And that is what we are going to discuss in the next class. So the three body paragraphs, how can we write 3 body paragraphs, are explained here. In question number 1, where we agree completely or disagree completely, I will be writing each paragraph. First paragraph agree, second paragraph agree, third paragraph agree. If you disagree, it is all 3 paragraphs disagree. But when you stand somewhere in the middle and not exactly at the exact middle, this is not the case. If you stand here or if you stand here, this is the final point. This is completely agree, this is completely disagree. Except in this case, if you stand here or if you stand here, you can write a 3 body paragraphs. You can, if you stand here nearly agree, you can write more agree paragraphs and a small disagree paragraph. If you stand here, you can write more disagree paragraph and a small agree paragraph. But we have one more option that we'll be discussing in the next class. That is, if you stand in exactly the middle, you can do that too. You are not going to present a 3 paragraph body. We are going to present a 2 paragraph body. But you have to be very careful in balancing the paragraph. It's not as easy as we have seen right now. So hope we'll meet you soon in the next class.